The classroom buzzed with casual chatter as students settled into their seats. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the tense expression on Mr. Thompson's face. He paced in front of the class, his sharp eyes scanning the room before landing on Maya, a quiet but strong willed student who always sat in the middle row. Today, however, something about her caught his attention. Her gold cross necklace glistened against her white shirt. He frowned. Maya, he called, his voice firm, making the entire class turn their heads. She looked up, confused. Yes, Mr. Thompson? He crossed his arms and pointed to her necklace. Do you really believe in that? The question silenced the class. A few students exchanged nervous glances, while others leaned in, eager to witness the brewing confrontation. Maya's hands instinctively reached for the small cross resting just above her heart. She met his gaze, unwavering. Yes, I do, she replied. Mr. Thompson let out a scoff. Faith is for the weak, he said. Relying on an invisible force instead of facts and logic? That's ridiculous. Maya's jaw clenched, but she remained calm. The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye was on her. Even those who rarely paid attention in class now seemed invested. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders. You may not understand, but this cross represents more than just faith to me, she said firmly. The teacher smirked, leaning against his desk. Oh, really? And what could possibly be so important about it? Maya's lips pressed together. She knew she could stay quiet, avoid the confrontation, but something inside her wouldn't let her. She had a story to tell, a story that would change everything. The classroom held its breath, waiting for her response. Maya's fingers traced the edges of her cross, her mind drifting back to a distant memory. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. This cross belonged to my mother, she began, her voice unwavering yet soft. She gave it to me before she passed away. A hush fell over the room. Even Mr. Thompson's smirk faded slightly. Maya continued. She wore this every day through the hardest times of her life. It was a reminder of strength, of hope. When she was diagnosed with cancer, she told me something I will never forget. Maya glanced down at the necklace, her eyes glistening. She said, no matter what happens, hold on to faith. It will guide you when nothing else can. A few students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked on with rapt attention. Mr. Thompson, for once, had no quick retort. My mother fought bravely, but she didn't make it, Maya continued, her voice thick with emotion. But this cross, it's not just jewelry. It's a piece of her, a reminder that strength comes in many forms. Silence stretched across the room. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, looking almost unsure for the first time. Maya took another deep breath. So, when you ask if I believe in this, the answer is yes, because faith isn't about weakness, it's about resilience. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. The class remained silent, absorbing her words. Mr. Work Thompson exhaled deeply, looking at Maya with something that almost resembled respect. For the first time, he had nothing to say. The air in the classroom remained heavy with emotion. Some students exchanged glances, unsure how to process what they had just heard. Others kept their eyes fixed on Maya, as if seeing her in a new light. Even Mr. Thompson, a man known for his rigid views, seemed momentarily at a loss. Clearing his throat, he adjusted his tie. Maya, he began, his voice softer than before. I didn't know about your mother, I'm sorry. Maya nodded, appreciating the sentiment but unwilling to let the moment slip away. It's okay, Mr. Thompson, but I think it's important to understand that faith isn't always about ignoring reality. It's about facing it with strength. A few students murmured in agreement. One of them, Jake, who usually kept to himself, hesitantly raised his hand. I think she's right, he said. My grandmother used to say the same thing. She always believed that faith gave her courage, not fear. Mr. Thompson pressed his lips together, considering the words. Perhaps I've been too dismissive, he admitted. I was raised to question everything, to rely only on logic. But maybe there's more to it than I've allowed myself to see. Maya smiled faintly. Belief and knowledge don't have to be enemies, she said. Sometimes they work together. The class remained silent as Aaliyah took a deep breath, steadying herself. Just as she was about to speak, a voice from the middle row broke the tension. She's right, said James, a quiet but respected student. We all have something we believe in. Why should she be forced to hide hers? Mr. Harrison narrowed his eyes, visibly taken aback by the sudden opposition. This isn't about belief, James. It's about maintaining a neutral environment where no one feels alienated. But, sir, interrupted Lisa, another student, some people wear bracelets for causes they support. Others wear cultural symbols. No one asks them to take those off. The murmurs grew louder as more students voiced their agreement. It was clear that Alaya's silent resistance had sparked something greater than just a personal defense. It had ignited a collective conversation about fairness. Alaya glanced around, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had expected to stand alone, but now she realized she wasn't the only one who felt this way. Mr. Harrison seemed to consider the words carefully. He exhaled sharply, his stern demeanor slightly softening. Fine. If this is something that truly means that much to you all, we can discuss it further. Aliyah met his gaze, determination unwavering. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the right to be seen and respected for who they were. News of the classroom confrontation quickly spread throughout the school. By lunchtime, students whispered about Aliyah's bravery, and some teachers exchanged concerned glances in the faculty lounge. The tension escalated until the matter reached the desk of Principal Edwards. By the afternoon, Aliyah was summoned to the principal's office. As she entered, she saw Mr. Harrison already seated, his expression unreadable. Principal Edwards, a woman known for her fairness, gestured for Aliyah to take a seat. Aliyah, she began in a measured tone, I've heard about the incident in your classroom. Would you like to explain your perspective? Aliyah swallowed hard but nodded. I wore my cross because it means something to me. I wasn't trying to make a statement or cause disruption. It's a part of who I am. Principal Edwards leaned back, considering her words. Then she turned to Mr. Harrison. And your concern? Mr. Harrison sighed. I just wanted to maintain neutrality in the classroom. I didn't mean to single her out, but rules are rules. Principal Edwards nodded. I understand both sides. However, our school's policy does allow students to wear personal religious symbols as long as they are not disruptive. Aliyah's heart lifted slightly. So I can keep wearing it? The principal offered a reassuring smile. Yes, you can. Mr. Harrison looked thoughtful but nodded in agreement. I see your point. Perhaps I reacted too strongly. Aliyah exhaled in relief. The battle wasn't just about a cross. It was about standing up for what she believed in. And in the end, fairness had prevailed. The next day in class, Mr. Harrison appeared different. His usually stern demeanor had softened, and his tone carried an unfamiliar gentleness. He glanced at Aliyah before addressing the class. Yesterday was a learning experience for all of us, he began. I realize now that personal beliefs and identities should be respected in a place of learning. I may not have handled things the right way, and for that, I apologize. Aliyah was stunned. She had never expected an apology, let alone a change in attitude. The class murmured in approval, and a few students nodded at Mr. Harrison in appreciation. I also want to thank Aliyah for standing up for herself, he continued. It takes courage to defend what you believe in, and I respect that. Aliyah smiled slightly. Thank you, sir. As the lesson resumed, the atmosphere in the room felt lighter. The confrontation had turned into an opportunity for growth, not just for Aliyah, but for the entire class. And for the first time in a long while, Mr. Harrison seemed like more than just a teacher. He seemed human. In the days that followed, Aliyah noticed a shift in her classmates. More students openly wore symbols of their faith and culture with newfound confidence. Conversations about acceptance and identity sparked discussions in other classrooms, even reaching the school board. Teachers began implementing discussions about inclusivity and respect, and Mr. Harrison himself led a classroom debate on freedom of expression. It was clear that what had started as a conflict had transformed into a movement. Aliyah felt proud but humbled. She had never sought attention, only fairness. And now she had helped create change beyond what she had ever imagined. Word of Aliyah's stand didn't just stay within the school. Local community members, parents, and even news outlets took interest in her story. What had started as a classroom conflict had turned into a broader discussion on personal freedom and religious expression. One evening, Aliyah's family received an invitation to a town hall meeting, where local leaders wanted to recognize her for standing up for her rights. Nervous yet honored, Aaliyah agreed to attend. At the meeting, she stood before a large crowd, her heart pounding. "I never wanted to cause a stir," she began, "but I couldn't ignore the fact that I was being asked to hide a part of who I am. No one should feel that way." The audience erupted in applause. Parents, students, and community members approached her afterward, sharing their own stories of times they had felt silenced. It became clear that her stand had encouraged others to embrace their identities more confidently. Back at school, Mr. Harrison had changed too. He encouraged open discussions about respect and diversity, and Aaliyah found herself at the center of a growing movement for inclusivity. She had never set out to be a leader, but her courage had sparked something much bigger than herself. Aaliyah's story continued to resonate beyond the walls of her school. Students from different backgrounds began to openly share their own experiences of feeling judged for their identities. The school administration, seeing the positive impact of the discussion, introduced a new initiative, the Respect and Inclusion Forum, where students and teachers could engage in meaningful conversations about cultural and religious diversity. One afternoon, Harrison approached Aaliyah in the hallway. "I owe you an apology," he admitted, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "You made me realize that respect isn't about erasing differences, but embracing them." Aaliyah smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate that." As the months passed, the classroom dynamic shifted. What had once been an environment of silent compliance turned into a space of dialogue and understanding. Students who once hesitated to express themselves found the courage to do so. Aaliyah never imagined that standing her ground would lead to such change. She had only wanted to wear her cross in peace. But in doing so, she had sparked a movement of acceptance that would leave a lasting impact on her school and beyond. With the principles ruling in her favor, Aaliyah felt a newfound sense of belonging at school. No longer worried about hiding her cross, she wore it with quiet pride. The Respect and Inclusion Forum had taken off, with students sharing their personal stories of identity, faith, and culture. One morning, as Aaliyah walked into class, she noticed Mr. Harrison standing by the whiteboard, looking thoughtful. He turned to face the class. "Today we're going to do something different," he announced. "I want each of you to write about something that defines you, something you're proud of." Aaliyah smiled to herself as she picked up her pen. She knew now that her courage had not only changed her own experience, but had also opened the door for others to embrace who they were without fear. As she began writing, she realized that this was not the end of her journey, but the beginning of something even greater. A week after Mr. Harrison's change of heart, the Respect and Inclusion Forum had gained significant momentum. More students joined, eager to share their stories and experiences. Posters promoting acceptance and understanding adorned the school walls, and discussions about diversity became a norm rather than an exception. One afternoon, Mr. Harrison approached Aaliyah after class. "I wanted to thank you," he admitted. "You've opened my eyes to something I hadn't considered before." Aaliyah smiled, surprised but grateful. "I think we all learned something from this, sir." As the school continued to evolve, Aaliyah realized that one voice could indeed spark change, and that change had only just begun. As the school year came to an end, Maya reflected on how much had changed. The classroom, once a place of strict debates and rigid perspectives, had transformed into a space of open-minded discussions and mutual respect. Mr. Thompson, who had once ridiculed her faith, now approached conversations with a willingness to understand rather than dismiss. One afternoon, he approached Maya after class. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice carrying an unusual warmth. "You taught me something I wasn't willing to see before." Maya smiled. "You taught me something too, Mr. Thompson, that sometimes change starts with a conversation." He nodded thoughtfully. "I suppose it does." As Maya walked down the hall, she felt lighter. She had stood up for what she believed in, but more importantly, she had shown that faith and understanding could coexist. A few feet away, Jake and some classmates waved her over. "Hey, Maya. We were just talking about starting a student discussion group, open to all perspectives. You in?" She grinned. "Absolutely." With a sense of accomplishment and hope, Maya knew that this was just the beginning. The world was full of different beliefs and ideas, but as long as people were willing to listen, understanding was always possible.